Sorry to interrupt, sir, but I believe there has been a misunderstanding in the translation of the Dutch contract, said the 12-year-old girl in perfect Dutch, addressing the billionaire who had just exploded in anger at her mother. Richard van der Berg, owner of America's largest luxury hotel chain, stopped shouting instantly. For 15 minutes, he had been trying to communicate with his Dutch partners through an incompetent interpreter, losing a $50 million deal. And now, a black child, the daughter of the cleaning lady he hadn't even noticed, spoke fluently the language that no one in that hotel mastered. Luana Santos was only 12 years old, but she had an IQ of 165, which her teachers discovered when she corrected a math error made by the principal herself. While other children watched cartoons, she devoured books on linguistics and philosophy that she found in the public library. What no one knew was that for 2 years she had been secretly observing the injustices that her mother, Conceição, suffered at that hotel. How can a child speak Dutch better than my official translator? Van der Berg muttered, still processing what he had just heard. At his side, Manager Thompson and Supervisor Williams exchanged nervous glances. For years, they had treated mother and daughter as invisible, openly mocking their educational pretensions. Conceição had been cleaning rooms at that hotel for 8 years, always taking Luana with her during school vacations. The girl observed everything: how the wealthy guests treated her mother like furniture, how the managers deliberately ignore her qualifications, a master's degree in literature, and above all, how they systematically rejected her applications for administrative positions. My mother speaks 5 languages and has a master's degree from USP, Luana continued in Portuguese, her eyes shining with an intelligence disturbing for her age. Maybe you should ask why she cleans bathrooms instead of working in the international sector. Thompson laughed nervously. Mr. van der Berg, children say such things. Let's get back to serious business. But van der Berg did not look away from the girl. Something in those determined eyes reminded him of himself as a child, the same intellectual hunger, the same rebellion against injustice. Keep talking in Dutch, he ordered. Luana smiled in a way that was almost disturbing for a child. Do you really want to know what I think about this place? She replied in fluent Dutch. For 2 years, she had secretly documented every episode of discrimination, every whispered racist comment, every opportunity denied to her mother. Thompson and Williams had no idea that this invisible little girl was building a dossier that would blow their careers apart. If you're enjoying this story of a child prodigy who decides to take on a corrupt system, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what Luana was about to reveal would not only transform her and her mother's lives, but completely destroy the people who underestimated the intelligence of a child who had spent years planning the perfect revenge. Van der Berg crossed his arms, studying Luana as if she were a fascinating puzzle. All right, young lady, impress me. What exactly have you observed about my business? Thompson took a step forward, trying to regain control of the situation. Mr. van der Berg, with all due respect, we can't waste time with childish games. The meeting with the Dutch is scheduled for. Silence, van der Berg cut him off, without taking his eyes off Luana. I want to hear what she has to say. Luana took a deep breath. For 2 years, she had witnessed international meetings ruined by incorrect translations, contracts lost due to cultural misunderstandings, and important clients offended by linguistic ignorance. All this while her mother, who spoke Dutch, French, English, Spanish, and Italian fluently, was forced to clean the bathrooms where these same executives relieved themselves. You lost the contract with the Rotterdam company because your translator confused formal terms with slang, Luana explained calmly. In Dutch business culture, this is considered extremely disrespectful. My mother tried to warn you about this 3 months ago, but... That's a lie, exploded Williams, the cleaning supervisor. Conceição never said anything about translations. She's just a cleaning lady. Conceição, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. I sent 7 memos to the international department over the last 2 years. All of them were ignored. Her voice was low, but laden with wounded dignity. Thompson laughed dismissively. Memos? A cleaning lady sending memos to executives? What kind of joke is that? I have copies, Luana said calmly, pulling a seemingly innocent school folder out of her backpack. Not just of the memos my mother sent, but also of the replies. Van der Berg held out his hand. May I see them? Williams tried to intervene again. Sir, this is ridiculous. A child with delusional fantasies trying to. Dr. Williams, Luana interrupted, deliberately using the title that the supervisor did not possess. You have an incomplete high school education and were promoted to supervisor in 6 months. My mother has a master's degree in French literature from USP and has been working here for 8 years in the same position. Don't you find that interesting? The silence that followed was deafening. Van der Berg opened the folder and his eyes widened. There were printouts of all the emails Conceição had sent over the years, pointing out translation errors, suggesting improvements to international protocols, and offering her language services. More importantly, there were Thompson's replies. Stay in your role and avoid future embarrassment, Van der Berg read aloud from one of Thompson's emails. Cleaning staff are not qualified to comment on business matters. Thompson turned pale. Sir, to provide more context. There's more, Van der Berg continued, turning the page. Here's an email where she accurately predicted the problem that cost us $2 million with the Japanese last month. Sent 3 weeks in advance. Williams began to sweat visibly. For years, he had openly mocked Conceição in the locker room, imitating her pretentious way of speaking, and questioning why a little black girl needed to use difficult words to talk about cleaning. In front of other employees, he always said that people like her should know their place. And there's this too, Luana added, showing a recording on her cell phone. Williams' voice was clearly audible. No matter what degree she has, people like that belong in cleaning. They can study as much as they want, but some things never change. Van der Berg clenched her fists. When was this recorded? Last week, in the women's locker room, Luana replied. While my mother was changing clothes after the double shift that Ms. Williams forces her to work every Friday as disciplinary punishment. The truth was that Luana had systematically documented every episode of racism and discrimination. She had recordings, printed emails, photos of torn memos she had retrieved from the trash, and even a detailed diary with dates, times, and witnesses of every humiliation her mother had suffered. Thompson tried one last desperate gambit. Mr. Van der Berg, it's clear that this child has been manipulated into creating this fantasy. Perhaps we should call social services to fantasy. Luana smiled in a way that made Thompson instinctively recoil. You want to talk about fantasies? Like the fantasy that your niece Jessica is studying in Europe, when in fact she was fired from the front desk for stealing money from the safe. Van der Berg slowly turned to Thompson. My niece works at the front desk. Worked, Luana corrected. Until you, Mr. Thompson, made up the story about Europe to cover up the theft. He reimbursed the money out of his own pocket to avoid scandal. I have the bank statements. What none of them knew was that Luana wasn't just a child prodigy passively observing. For 2 years, she had built up a network of information that included employees from every department, from the kitchen to accounting. People who, like her mother, were treated as invisible, but who saw and heard everything. Every underestimated person in that hotel had become her eyes and ears. The lady in the kitchen who spoke Russian and had training in international cuisine, but was limited to peeling potatoes. The maintenance guy who was an engineer trained in Venezuela, but whose degree was not recognized. They had all fed Luana's dossier with information that was now about to explode like a bomb. Van der Berg looked at Thompson and Williams as if seeing them for the first time. You two, out of my office. Now. Sir, please, you can't take the inventions of a, Williams tried to protest. The 12-year-old girl who speaks Dutch better than my $50,000 translator? Van der Berg interrupted. The same girl whose mother anticipated problems that cost me millions? These fabrications. As Thompson and Williams left the room with expressions of barely concealed panic, Van der Berg turned to Luana. You said you've been documenting all this for 2 years. Why? Luana looked directly into the billionaire's eyes. Because my mother taught me that injustice only thrives when people pretend not to see it. And I see everything. What Thompson and Williams didn't realize as they left that office was that their humiliation had been only the first act of something much bigger. For 2 years, that seemingly invisible girl had built such a solid case against them that even the best lawyers couldn't save their careers. And the worst was yet to come, because Luana had discovered something about the hotel's operations that went far beyond simple racial discrimination, something that would turn the local investigation into a national scandal. 3 days after the explosion in Van der Berg's office, the Grand Plaza Hotel operated in tense silence. Thompson had been suspended pending investigation, while Williams had been demoted to supervising only the night shift. But for Luana, this was only the first move in a much more complex game. "You have no idea what you've done," Williams whispered to Conceição in the locker room, her voice thick with venom. "Your stuck-up little girl may have impressed the boss, but that's not going to change anything here. People like you always end up back where they belong." Conceição remained silent, as she always did. What Williams didn't know was that Luana had discreetly installed a recording app on the old cell phone her mother carried in her uniform pocket. Every threat, every racist comment, every attempt at retaliation was being documented in real time. Van der Berg had set up an internal commission to investigate the allegations, but Luana knew that corporate investigations were easily manipulated. So over 2 years, she had built something much more powerful, an information network that spanned all sectors of the hotel, connecting invisible employees who held explosive secrets. Her first ally had been Carmen, from the laundry room, who spoke fluent Spanish and had a degree in international accounting. "The bedding of VIP guests always arrives with papers left in the pockets," Carmen confided to Luana months ago. "Contracts, receipts, things they don't want anyone to see." The second was Roberto, from the technical department, a Venezuelan engineer whose degree was not recognized in the U.S. "The computers in the executive office stay on all night," he had observed. "And I have access for maintenance." For 2 years, while playing invisible child in the hotel corridors, Luana had coordinated an intelligence operation that would be the envy of any professional detective. Her network had discovered something that would turn the discrimination investigation into a national criminal scandal. "Mr. Van der Berg," Luana said on the phone, using the direct number he had given her after their last conversation. "I need to talk to you about something much more serious than discrimination. It has to do with money laundering." Van der Berg nearly dropped his coffee. "What are you talking about, kid?" Thompson wasn't just rejecting qualified employees because of racism, Luana explained with the unsettling calm that had become her trademark. He was using the Human Resources Department to create ghost employees. People who exist only on paper but receive real salaries. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "My network discovered that over the past 5 years, Thompson has created 47 fake identities in the payroll system. They all receive salaries between $3,000 and $5,000 a month, deposited into accounts he controls. That adds up to over $2 million stolen." Van der Berg took a deep breath. "Do you have proof?" Roberto photographed the system records. Carmen intercepted bank documents that Thompson forgot in his suit pocket. "And I recorded a conversation between him and Williams about using cleaning staff as scapegoats if anything was discovered." The truth was that Luana had discovered the scheme by accident 6 months ago, when she noticed that the official staff roster didn't match the people she actually saw working. Names like James Patterson and Michelle Roberts appeared on the lists, but no one knew them. A discreet investigation revealed that these people simply did not exist. "Thompson has been using our discrimination as a smokescreen," Luana continued. "Employees like my mother are kept in subordinate positions not only because of racism, but because invisible employees don't ask questions about irregularities in payroll." Van der Berg was processing the information. "Why didn't you come to me with this before?" "Because until last week, I wasn't sure if you were involved," Luana replied with brutal honesty. "My mother always said, never accuse someone of corruption unless you can prove they didn't know about it." The girl's logic was impeccable. Van der Berg had inherited that hotel from his father 2 years ago and spent most of his time managing other properties. Thompson had carte blanche for internal operations, and she had built her scheme carefully, using institutional bias to keep qualified employees away from positions where they could discover irregularities. "There's more," Luana said. "Williams isn't just a passive accomplice. She created a system where cleaning staff work unpaid double shifts as disciplinary punishment. That extra work is being billed as hours worked by ghost employees." Thompson's plan was diabolically clever. Keeping qualified employees in menial positions ensured that they were too busy and too intimidated to investigate discrepancies. Using systematic discrimination wasn't just cruelty, it was criminal strategy. "I have everything documented," Luana concluded. "But I need your help with one thing. Thompson found out that I know about the ghost employees. Yesterday he tried to convince my mother to take me for psychological counseling, because a child with elaborate fantasies needs professional help." Van der Berg clenched his fists. "He's trying to discredit you." Exactly. And if he manages to label me as a troubled child with an overactive imagination, all the evidence I've collected could be dismissed as childish fabrications. The call ended with Van der Berg promising a secret meeting the next morning. What he didn't know was that Luana had already anticipated Thompson's next move. For months, she had been preparing a strategy that would not only protect the credibility of her evidence, but would turn the attempt to discredit her into the final lever to completely destroy her opponent. Meanwhile, behind the scenes at the hotel, her network of invisible allies continued to gather information. Carmen had intercepted a flash drive containing international bank transfer files. Roberto discovered that Thompson kept 2 sets of accounting books in the system. And the new receptionist, a journalism student whom Luana had discreetly alerted to the story, had begun asking the right questions to the right people. What Thompson didn't realize as he plotted to discredit a troublesome child was that this 12-year-old girl had orchestrated such a meticulous investigation that even the best criminal lawyers would be unable to find any loopholes. And most devastatingly, she had recorded his every attempt to intimidate witnesses, creating evidence not only of financial fraud but also of obstruction of justice. The next morning, when Thompson arrived at work believing he had found a way to neutralize his only real threat, he would discover that he had underestimated not only a child prodigy, but a strategist who had turned every act of contempt into a weapon that was now aimed directly at his complete destruction. What no one at the Grand Plaza Hotel could have imagined was that little Luana had studied not only linguistics for the past 2 years, but also criminal law, forensic accounting, and criminal psychology, all through books from the public library she visited religiously after helping her mother at work. And now, with all the pieces finally in place, she was ready to deliver checkmate in a game Thompson didn't even know he was losing from day one. The emergency board meeting was called for 10 a.m. on Friday. Van der Berg had promised Luana that it would only be a discreet investigation, but she had other plans. During the night, she had sent an anonymous email to 3 investigative journalists, 2 federal prosecutors, and the FBI's Financial Crimes Department, attaching some of her evidence with the following message: luxury hotel in Manhattan uses racial discrimination to cover up $2 million money laundering scheme. Internal investigation takes place today at 10 a.m. You may want to take a look. Thompson arrived at work that morning believing he could turn the situation around. He had spent the night preparing a defense that portrayed Luana as a fanciful child manipulated by a resentful mother, and Conceição as a troublesome employee who invented imaginary persecutions. His plan was simple: discredit the sources, minimize the evidence, and shift the blame to administrative misunderstandings. "Good morning, Thompson," Van der Berg greeted him as the manager entered the conference room. "I hope you've brought convincing explanations." Thompson adjusted his tie with forced confidence. "Mr. Van der Berg, after carefully reviewing the situation, I believe we have been the victims of a smear campaign orchestrated by dissatisfied employees." The girl was clearly instructed to. "The girl," interrupted a female voice from the doorway, "has a name. And she also has this." Luana entered carrying a cardboard box and a laptop. Behind her came Carmen, Roberto, and 6 other employees whom Thompson immediately recognized as people he had bullied over the years. Their faces showed a determination that made him gulp. "What is this?" Thompson asked, trying to maintain his authoritative tone. "Mr. Van der Berg, we can't allow junior employees to interrupt." "The junior employees," Luana said calmly, opening the laptop, "are the ones you've underestimated for so long that you've forgotten they also have eyes, ears, and cell phones." The first thing that appeared on the screen was a meticulously organized spreadsheet. 47 ghost employees, Luana announced. $2,300,000 embezzled over 5 years. "And here," she clicked, "are the bank transfers to accounts you control, Mr. Thompson." Thompson's face went from red to white in a matter of seconds. That's impossible. You don't have access." "Roberto has access to the systems for maintenance," Luana explained. "Carmen has worked in the laundry for 15 years and knows every piece of paper that passes through this hotel. And she smiled with that disturbing coldness, "I learned that invisible children can record conversations without anyone noticing." She clicked again, and Thompson's voice echoed through the room. "Williams, you need to make sure that black woman and her daughter don't ask any more questions. If they find out about the ghost employees, we're done for. Use any excuse, insubordination, inappropriate behavior, whatever." Williams, who had arrived minutes earlier, tried one last desperate gambit. "This is a setup. A child couldn't possibly." A child with an IQ of 165 and 2 years of planning can do a lot, Luana replied. Especially when that child has a network of allies that you've treated like trash for years. Van der Berg looked at Thompson with a mixture of disgust and disbelief. 2 million, Thomas? And you had the nerve to use racial discrimination to cover it up. There's more, Luana continued, her words falling like bombs. The disciplinary punishments Williams imposed were unpaid slave labor. Cleaning staff working double shifts without pay, with the overtime billed as work done by ghost employees. She showed timesheet after timesheet, all signed by Williams. My mother worked 847 hours of overtime in the last 2 years without receiving any compensation. Carmen, 1,200 hours. Rosa, from the kitchen, 1,500 hours. Williams was visibly shaking now. They took the extra shifts voluntarily. Under threat of dismissal, Carmen added, speaking for the first time. You said that if we refused, people like us wouldn't find work anywhere. Roberto added his part, and I documented every time you ordered me to delete maintenance records to hide evidence that the computers were being used to access bank accounts outside business hours. Thompson tried to get up, but Van der Berg gestured for him to sit down. We're not done yet. Luana clicked once more, and a new recording began to play. This time it was William's voice. That little black girl and her daughter think they're special because they can speak languages. I'm going to show them their place in this society. People like that need to learn not to meddle where they're not wanted. The ensuing silence was broken only by the sound of the door opening. 3 men in suits entered the room, showing their FBI badges. Mr. Richard Van der Berg, asked the oldest agent. We have received a detailed report about possible fraud and slave labor at this establishment. We would like to ask you a few questions. Thompson finally panicked completely. This is a setup. A child cannot. You have no right to. Actually, said the agent, consulting his tablet, we received an extremely well-documented complaint. We rarely see such organized and convincing evidence. The person who compiled this is well-versed in the legal system. Van der Berg looked at Luana with a mixture of admiration and horror. How did you know they were coming? Because I called them, Luana replied simply. Last night. Systematic racial discrimination is a federal crime. Slave labor is a federal crime. Money laundering through ghost employees is a federal crime. And I have evidence of all of it. As the agents began reviewing the documents, Thompson made one last desperate attempt. Mr. Van der Berg, please, we can resolve this internally. I've been a loyal employee for 15 years. A loyal employee, Van der Berg repeated slowly, who stole $2 million from my company, exploited employees based on the color of their skin, and still had the audacity to try to discredit a child who exposed your crimes. Williams was crying now, realizing his career was over. I was just following orders. Orders that included calling my mother little black girl, and telling her she should know her place, asked Luana, her voice maintaining that frightening calm. Because I have 15 recordings of you saying that. The older agent closed the tablet. Mr. Thompson, Ms. Williams, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court. As the handcuffs were put on, Thompson looked at Luana with pure hatred. You're just a child. You don't understand how the world works. Luana smiled one last time, but now her smile was genuine. I understand that the world works with evidence, Mr. Thompson. And I spent 2 years collecting evidence about how people like you work. Van der Berg watched his former employees being taken into custody and then turned to Luana. You orchestrated all of this. From the first day when you showed me your mother's memos. Actually, Luana corrected, I orchestrated this from the day Williams said my mother should know her place. I was 10 years old, but I already knew that someday I would find a way to show her what her place really was. Today we found out, her place is in a prison cell. The last 2 years had not been just about documenting discrimination. Luana had studied criminal law in the library, learned about federal crimes, understood how the FBI reporting system works. She had turned every act of racism into evidence, every humiliation into criminal proof, every moment of contempt into a piece of the puzzle that was now complete. Van der Berg looked at the 12-year-old girl who had just destroyed a criminal scheme that had lasted for years. What do you want now, Luana? "Justice," she replied. "And an opportunity for my mother to finally work in the position for which she is qualified." Through the window, they could see Thompson and Williams being put into the FBI vehicle. The expressions of panic and disbelief on their faces contrasted sharply with Luana's calm satisfaction. 2 years of meticulous planning had resulted in the complete destruction of her oppressors. What none of them could have imagined at that moment was that the story of the prodigy girl who took down a criminal scheme would spread across national newspapers, turning Luana into a media sensation and forcing an investigation into the entire hotel chain. An investigation that would reveal that the Grand Plaza was just the tip of a much larger iceberg, where institutionalized prejudice hid systemic corruption that extended throughout the industry. 6 months later, Conceição Santos was sitting in her new office on the 25th floor, now as Director of International Relations for the hotel chain. Her salary had jumped from $2,000 to $15,000 a month, and Luana attended a private school for gifted children, paid for entirely by the company as an investment in exceptional talent. Thompson was sentenced to 8 years in prison for fraud and money laundering. Williams got 4 years for slave labor and racial discrimination. Both lost their homes to pay compensation to the victims. "Mom, the newspaper wants to do another interview," Luana said, showing her cell phone. Her story had gone viral nationally, inspiring other children to report injustices in their schools and communities. Vanderberg implemented the Luana Santos program across the entire network. Qualified employees in subordinate positions are automatically promoted after a skills audit. In 1 year, 847 people were reclassified, generating savings of $12 million in unnecessary outsourcing. "Do you know what the best part of all this was?" reflected Conceição, watching her daughter study Mandarin on her tablet. "It wasn't revenge. It was discovering that our dignity never depended on their recognition." Luana smiled, that smile that had once haunted Thompson. The best revenge is the success they said was impossible. Meanwhile, in a federal penitentiary, Thompson cleaned toilets, ironically, the same job he had forced qualified people to do for years. Life has these poetic ironies. The story of the 12-year-old girl who took down a criminal scheme proved a simple truth. Underestimating someone based on prejudice is not only morally wrong, it's strategically stupid. If this story has inspired you to never underestimate the power of intelligence over prejudice, subscribe to the channel and share it with anyone who needs to be reminded that justice sometimes comes in small but devastatingly effective packages.